In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, peace be upon you. Apologies, I speak slowly. To speed up this video, click on settings and select a suitable speed. This video is about the lying statistics from Gog and Magog anti-Christian Khanzir, Keith Vaz. So this paragraph I've just copied and pasted from the website indicated, and it's about how Keith Vaz has some figures on ethnicity for those convicted of grooming, taken from Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. Their report, Out of Mind, Out of Sight, from June 2011, contains relevant figures on localised grooming. This is a form of sexual exploitation, previously referred to as on-street grooming in the media, where children have been groomed and sexually exploited by an offender having initially met in a location outside their home, usually in a public place such as a park, cinema, on the street, or a friend's house. The information collected covered the period between January 2008 and March 2011. CEOP grouped offenders in two categories according to how much information was available about the individual. The first category, Group 1, contained detailed information on the ethnicity of the perpetrators, while Group 2 had only limited information associated with them. Information gathered from the two groups is presented in the table below, except that it is not, because I thought we'd have a look at who Keith Vaz is first and foremost. Now, there had been an investigation into this Gog and Magog anti-Christian satanic Khanzir, because apparently he had paid two men for sex while his committee reviewed laws on sex work. So I have no doubt whatsoever that this man is also a paedophile and he uses little boys. So because he's got this going on in his head, his own paedophilia, he likes to blame other people. I can see that he's probably Hindu from his name and from what he looks like, and so he's sexed up some figures against Pakistani Muslims. Now here is the table of figures that I obtained from the website that I copied the paragraph from. I inserted these figures into my own Excel document. So I did want to okay, so let's have a look at this. They've got the number of sex offenders in the first column. As you can see, it says 346 next to white British. Okay, then what they have done is worked out the percentage of white British and white other, and inserted it in the second column. So they added 346 plus the number 14 below, okay, divided it by the total number, which is not indicated under the number column. Under 299 there should be another value which would be the total of that column. So if you took 346, added it to 14, divided it by the total and times it by 100, you would get 38. Okay, so 38% out of the entire group of white, black, Chinese, Asian are group 1 white offenders. And then they've also added a column in which they've added 346 plus 14, and it equals 360. And yes, that's what. And then they've taken the 360, divided it by 940, and if I was to add that first column, it would add up to 940, and 38% is the proportion of 360 divided by 940 as a percentage. Then they've put a value in the group 2 offenders, which is 7. Worked out the total of group 2 offenders. Again, it's 7 for whites. Then they have totaled up. So they took the 346 for only white British, added it to 7 more white British and got 353. And below that they've got the white other, which is 14. And then they've added, you can see in the last column, they added the 353 plus the 14, which makes 367 out of a total of 1217, and worked out that that is 30%. Now, what I did in my table was I did not separate, I did not bring all the whites together. I had a separate row for white British and a separate row for white other. So I've been working out percentages, but separating white British, white other, black African, black Caribbean, and so on. And you will see this on my next slide. So here is my slide, the exact table from the previous slide, except if you look at my percentage total, I have split the percentage totals for each group. So white British is 29%, white other is 1%, 1.15%, black African is 0.49%, and so on. They had combined white British and white other to get 30%. So I hope you are following me and understand what I did so far. Okay, so I took this a step further and I added 2 extra columns. You can see one column has a green outline and one column has a red outline. Now, in the green outline is the proportion of the particular ethnicity in the entire UK population. So you can see that Asian other is 4%, Asian Pakistani is 2%, white British is 80.5%, and I will show you where I got these values from as well a bit further on. So then I worked out that if there were 100 offenders, 100 people, how many would be offenders? And you'll see there's some shocking results. So if we look at the Asian Pakistani, and I'll show you how I worked this out, because I took the value for the total offenders, in this case 3.697617, divided it by the percentage in the total population, which is 2%, and multiplied it by 100. So as you can see, there's problems already, because the percentage of offenders is greater than the percentage in the population. So I've got a result of 185%. Sorry, approximately 185 would likely be offenders in a population of 100 Asian Pakistanis, which is disproportionate, let's say. If we look at the white British, in a population of 100, 36 would be offenders. If we look at the Chinese, in a population of 100, 22 people would approximately be offenders. If we look at black other, in a population of 100, we're expecting 460 to be offenders. Under Asian other, in a population of 100, we're expecting 596 to be offenders. So you can see that any value over 100 suggests a disproportionately high number of offenders. And what I also did for you is that I ordered this data from the highest to the lowest. So Asian other have the highest expected offenders. Then we've got black other. Then we've got Asian Pakistani, Asian Bangladeshi, and then white British. And it is, quite ridiculous, isn't it, that there's 100 people and you've got about 600 are likely to offend. That is quite a ridiculous thing. And so already this is indicating that we've got some rubbish data that we're dealing with. Not only that, we can see that although the data was split in terms of Asian Pakistani, we don't have Asian Indian in there. We don't have Asian Sri Lankan in there. We don't have, what is Asian other? We have no idea. Do we? What is black other? We have no idea. Let's have a look at the next slide. So this is where I got the data for the population of the UK, and I looked at the 2011 data. So you can see, if I go along the dark line for Pakistanis, it comes to 2% of the entire population. So that is where I got that population percentage from. And there was a note on the webpage that it said that this graph excluded white British and their percentage was 80.5%. Okay, so to put that table of results in perspective and to show how meaningless and rubbish the data is, let's have a look at this graph that I've taken from the website Indicated. Now it shows the percentage of offenders sentenced to immediate custody for indictable offences 2014, and at the point that I'm talking through this, I'm not sure if it's from, this data is from America. So you can see that 27% of white people are sentenced to immediate custody, whereas 30% of blacks are sentenced to immediate custody, and 32% of Asians are sentenced to immediate custody. So there's something wrong there, isn't there? There's some racism, some bias, some prejudice going on there. And so the figures that we looked at earlier on in the table are inaccurate because of the bias of the Gog and Magog anti-Christian satanic society. Let's have a look at the next graph. So here it says that it talks about the racial disparity. Black people use less drugs than white people, so almost just over half. But they are 6 times more likely to be stopped and searched for drugs. So this is going to impact the results table we saw earlier, isn't it? That is why when we have 100 people, 100 Asians, we're expecting much more to be arrested. That is why there's that inaccurate prediction, because the information is rubbish, and if you put rubbish in, you will get rubbish out. Here's another interesting graph, and if I read the sentence at the top, it says, for every 100 white women handed custodial sentences at Crown Courts for drug offences, the report found 227 black women were sentenced to custody. So, for every 100 white women handed sentences, 227 black women were handed sentences for similar crimes. Beneath that, we've got a graph for miscellaneous crimes. So for every 100 white women handed custodial sentences, about 160, 170 black women were handed sentences. In terms of theft, for every 100 white women handed sentences, about 110 black women were handed sentences. Now, if you had 100 white women whereby someone attacked them, then all 100 men or whoever did the attacking were handed sentences. But in terms of the black women, if they complained about an assault, then only about 80-90 of the attackers were arrested. Here is another interesting graph showing how many millions in terms of blacks or whites are taking drugs above the age of 12. And you can see that the proportion of blacks taking drugs is a lot lower than the proportion of whites. And it's these sorts of things that they want to explain and blame. They want to explain and blame others. They want to blame Pakistanis that they're giving the white girls drugs. You must repent as a people. You must repent all your criminal activities when you got the Native Americans addicted and destroyed their people, when you got the Aborigines addicted and diseased and destroyed their people, when you committed genocide against the South Asians, you're still committing genocide against the people in the Middle East and Africa. You have to, don't blame yourselves, blame your own evils, okay, because what goes around comes around. And then you try to get the Pakistanis addicted to drugs, but it's your own daughters that are becoming addicted. I pray that Allah guides you, protects you and gives you peace. May Allah guide the Satanists, anti-Christians, Gog and Magog, and the devil to the straight path. May the ultimate success be that all creation unite for truth and justice. Please Allah grant us all guidance. Please Allah grant us all forgiveness. Please Allah make the children be a source of peace for their parents, and the parents be a source of peace for the children. And please Allah make me be a source of peace for all, and may I achieve martyrdom defending the vulnerable. Allahu Akbar and Allah Hafiz.